Would you like to learn how to make the best ice creams at home?
Well, today on WTF, we're going to take you through everything from the ingredients to the churn so you can make the best ice cream at home. Hello and welcome to WTF, where we transform food here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen. I'm Chef Scott Garin.
And I'm Janie Wang, one of the owners of Modernist Pantry. Here on WTF, every week we cover unique ingredients and techniques and show you recipes for your kitchen. So remember to subscribe and also stick around for our weekly giveaway. This week we are going through a complete ice cream primer to show you exactly how to make different types of bases, how do you churn them, how do you cook them, and how do you get the best ice cream textures possible. And Scott, this is a huge topic, so we're going to be breaking it down to various chapters. If you think there's something specific you want to know, look below in the description for the chapter. You can always jump ahead to that as well. And I think where we want to start, Scott, is talking about bases. What are the different types of bases and someone might see in a recipe book, and what exactly makes them different?
So there's going to be three basic ice cream bases. We're not getting into gelato, we're not talking about sherbet, sorbet, anything. We're just talking about ice cream. So it's going to be an American style ice cream, a French ice cream, and a frozen custard. And the reason why we stuck with these three is they all follow the same recipe but have very slight variations that change one, how you cook them, how you churn them, how they taste, how they feel, but they're all based on the same exact recipe, just slightly different. You're going to get a different result out of all of them.
Yeah, and what components are varying between those?
Honestly, it's going to be fat content. Okay. So everything starts with these ingredients here. We have cream, milk, sugar, salt, just a little bit, vanilla bean. You can use extract if you want. We chose our grade A vanilla beans because you just get the best flavor out of them. And we have a little bit of a stabilizer, which we use Perfect Ice Cream. That can be the base of all of them. If you want to make French, you add 3 egg yolks. Okay. Now this completely changes the procedure because I can't just blend it all together and then put it into an ice cream maker. It's not going to have the right consistency. Okay. And then if you want to add frozen custard, you add 2 more egg yolks. Okay. So there's just varying types or varying ratios of fat. The more fat, the creamier you're going to have, the texture be, and also what are you going to have to do during the cooking process. So they all follow the same basis of the recipe, but there's just different variations on the fat level.
All right, and I see that you have the 3 bases here. Which one is which?
Sure. So this one, all the way to your right, is going to be the American base. So it's basically cream, milk, sugar, salt, vanilla, and the stabilizer. That's it. So it's going to be the lightest in color. I also find that this has the most up-forward vanilla flavor. Okay. So vanilla is your type of ice cream. This is going to give you that really big blast of vanilla flavor because there's less fat to kind of cover up all those extra flavors. Can you vary? Can you make that variance when you're doing the other things? Of course, but we wanted to keep them all consistent because that's what you're going to usually do with these recipes. So big vanilla flavor here. A little bit of the fat in the French style ice cream, I find gives it better texture. It's going to make it creamier, easier to scoop because the fat doesn't freeze at the same temperature as water. And then when you get up to frozen custard, more fat, easier to scoop. Also covers up a lot of that vanilla flavor, but you don't want it necessarily with that. The vanilla flavor is there to cover up those eggs and make a really balanced kind of flavor. So we can actually taste all 3 of these. Okay. These are all cooked and ready to go, and we have some spoons right there, Janie. So if you want to just try all 3, I'll take a spoon as well.
Here you go. Sorry, we're double dipping. Sorry.
Oh no, we got plenty of spoons.
I know. So. We do have a lot of spoons. Never mind.
So we're gonna do the American ice cream base. Right off the bat, sweet. I mean, all of these have the same amount of sugar, but it's sweet, and then you get a lot of vanilla. It's clean, very nice. What do you think?
I like it, definitely very vanilla forward, and I just want to know, for our discussion today, we did vanilla because we wanted to keep everything consistent and minimize the amount of variables. But obviously, whatever you take away from today can be applied to whatever flavor of ice cream that you're looking to make.
Of course. Let's imagine you tried to make chocolate here. That's adding fat. Completely changes a recipe, right? You want to toss this
Here
in
you go. All right, I'll swap spoons.
So we'll go right into the French. So remember, this is about three egg yolks per batch. So we have a nice color, nice consistency. Immediately much more rich than the last. I get slightly less vanilla. It's minor, but
yeah, I like the richer mouthfeel personally. So that would be, but you're right, like there's a huge difference. I think it's kind of like anything else when you're not tasting them side by side, it's not noticeable. But when you are, all these minute differences suddenly become very, very exaggerated.
Yes, and you can absolutely see with the frozen custard base, it's thicker, it's a darker yellow color. I love it. Actually, I love all these because each one is so different, but they're basically the same. But yeah, I definitely get a lot more of that like richness and mouth coating kind of texture.
Agree. I'm always more fat, more better. So the frozen custard would be my favorite out of these. But obviously, I think depending on your recipe and what you're doing, you can go with any of them.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll be right back with the reset table where we'll be talking about the different ways that you can cook your base. Once you've selected your base, then it's time to decide how do you want to cook it. Scott, what are the most common types of cooking that people will come across?
So there's going to be three different ways you can really cook your base. One is going to be a no-cook, and that's going to be for something like the American style ice cream. There's no eggs in it, so it does not need to be brought up to a specific temperature. But when you're doing that, you're going to run into an issue with your stabilizer. So you're going to need to switch from a perfect ice cream to a perfect sorbet. The reason why we do that is that one still will give you the same similar texture, but it just does not need to be cooked. If you wanted to use a perfect ice cream in there, you could. Just know that it won't bring it to the right, the exact consistency because it doesn't have all of the elements hydrated in it. We can talk about that in a second.
Okay.
So we're going to demo this in just a minute. But the other ways to cook are going to be over a double boiler. This is going to be the most common if you're using any eggs. The reason why it changes the method is that those eggs, one, should probably be pasteurized. Two, if you cook them to a specific temperature, the proteins are going to start to coagulate and also give it that richer texture that we're looking for. It needs to be brought up to about 180 degrees. Anything over that, the coagulation of those proteins will start to tighten. You'll get scrambled eggs. We don't want that. And a way to completely prevent that is to do it in an immersion circulator. You can set it to 180 degrees. It'll never go above 180 degrees, so it will never cook the eggs higher than 180 degrees. And two, we don't have to heat up our cream, mix it with the eggs, place it back in a double boiler, cook it, temp it. Nope, I just put it all into a bag and I place it in the immersion circulator. That is the easiest way to go if you are actually cooking. If not, the no-cook method's going to be probably the best. And we're going to demo this right now just to show how simple it is to make make a no-cook ice cream at home. So I'll give the ratios. It's very simple. We have 1 cup of heavy cream. Usually when you're starting a recipe, it's going to be 2 parts heavy cream to 1 part whole milk. Now, can you vary that a little bit? Of course you can. If you wanted to add all heavy cream, you could. Just know that it's going to change how it ends, how the freezing temperature is and how the final consistency is, but it's still going to work. So that's half a cup of whole milk, 1 cup of heavy cream. Now we have a 1/4 cup of sugar that has 2 tablespoons of extra sugar. So 1/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons. Just a little bit of salt. And generally you would add the stabilizer directly in with the sugar, but I want to just show you how to do it differently. I can add in my vanilla bean. Now, if you don't, let's say you get the sugar in there and go, oh no, I forgot to put in my stabilizer.
Yep,
Is it ruined? Yes, it happens, right? So basically, the best thing you can do is to start the blend and then just gently sprinkle it in while it's blending. That's going to be your best bet if you forget to dry mix it with your sugar or anything like that.
And for people who are not familiar with stabilizers, what is the role of the stabilizer?
Great question. So the stabilizer will do a couple different things. It'll slightly thicken the base, and in doing so, as you freeze it, it will coat those ice crystals so they're less apparent on your palate, so you don't feel them as much. And that way, you feel and you believe it's actually smoother than it is, which it does a great job of, turning ice creams that are in different types of churns just better because of it being in there. So we can get this going. And I almost never, I almost always use a stabilizer. I never try to make it without, just because the benefits outweigh anything else. It's just a better product all around.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been making ice cream at home and you're like, oh, my ice cream comes out like really ice crystal-y after a few days, or it's like, super hard, and we'll talk about that later, but a stabilizer will really just make your life easier all around.
Yes. Yeah, it adds a little bit to the scoopability, but really it's that melting consistency. All those things are just going to be better off. You can already see it's definitely thicker. One thing you don't want to do is overblend.
Okay.
Because there is a lot of butter fat in here with that heavy cream, and you don't want to turn it into butter by overblending it. So blend it until it's completely mixed in. No more than about 30 seconds. And I can take this, place it in the refrigerator, chill it down, and then into whatever churn I'm doing.
Okay.
So that's the 3 different ways that you can cook a base, and all of these are ready to go at this point.
All right, we're going to reset the table again, and when we're back, we are going to show you the different ways that you can make the ice cream. In this segment, we are talking about what the effects of different types of equipment will have on the types of ice cream that come out. And note that we are talking about equipment most people will have in their homes, so store-bought ice cream machines. If you want to watch our episode about the Ninja Creamy or the Palco Jet, which are more advanced micro-puree technology, we'll link to that at the end. But today we're going to talk about things that most folks will have in their homes. And speaking of which, Scott, what are the types of equipment that people will commonly have in their kitchens?
So the most basic piece of equipment is going to be a hand churn. There's a few different types. There's actually an old type where you take 2 coffee cans, place it in there with some ice, and roll it around on your counter. The hand churn is basically that. It's ice packed around a bowl where you churn it by just churning it with your hand. Then we have basically the next step up would be a frozen bowl. So you have a freezer bowl that you would put onto a mixer, or they have like standalone units that do it. And basically you freeze it in your freezer, take it out, pour in your base, and freeze it that way. Then we have a condenser, which is going to be the #1 way that you can do it at home if you're doing like a traditional churn. So this has a condenser in it, which freezes the bowl and consistently puts in cold energy. So it's keeping it cold the whole time, whereas the hand churn and the freezer bowl style are pulling warmth out and then melting. And sometimes if you try to do multiple batches, it's impossible unless you have multiple bowls or have an endless supply of ice, which some people just don't have at home. It's understandable. So we went with all 3 of these. These are all control style. The higher you get in the fat content, the less you're going to notice a difference. And that's a good thing, because that extra fat, then you have the stabilizer on top of it. You've cooked it. There's a good amount of sugar in here. You're going to notice less of a difference. There'll be a minor difference, but the more fat, the better it's going to be in the long run, depending on what you have. The less fat you have, the more issues you're going to run into, because the slower you freeze something, the larger the ice crystals will be. Right. So if we have more fat, we have more things to cover up those larger ice crystals. But if you have less fat, like the American style, those ice crystals are just going to be that much bigger. It's going to be harder to scoop, and it's going to just feel almost like a slushie on your tongue rather than a nice, super smooth, creamy ice cream. And we do everything we can to prevent it by adding a stabilizer and whatnot, but there's just less fat. So.
Yeah. All right, so let's start with the American here. What are these 3 scoops?
Sure, so they all go in the same way. The one that's closest to the camera is going to be the hand churn. The middle is the bowl, and then the one closest to us is the condenser. So all 3 of them, they all look relatively similar. You can see a few in these just melted a lot quicker, which generally means that there wasn't as much, tight-knit ice crystallization. They haven't had enough time to, stay together. So these melted just a little bit, but then you can see the condenser is the most consistent of all 3 of these. So we can try.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to scoop from my side. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go on the...
So this is the hand-churned American style.
Yep. If you bite it, immediately it's almost like a crispiness to it.
It's very icy.
Yep.
It's not definitely not what I think about when I think about ice cream. So I would say
this to me feels like, I don't want to say this, my wife made this at home. She's a delight. But this definitely feels like, oh, I made you ice cream. This is what I'd get, right? It seems like a very much homemade ice cream.
This comes out,
I'm going to get hell for that, right?
Your phone's going to be ringing. What did you say about me on camera?
I can already, the scoop on this is just better.
And this was the...
All three of these up front
Okay.
are the hand crank. So I still get a little bit of that iciness, but it's just a lot smoother, especially like digging into it with the spoon.
Yeah. It's not terrible, but still too icy for me.
Okay, and then we're going to go here, which is the
Frozen custard.
Frozen custard, yes. The French is in the middle. I like that one the best, obviously. It's
a lot creamier.
A lot creamier.
But still too icy.
Yes.
Like the iciness is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Almost,
Yep. All right, so we can go here. This is going to be the frozen bowl, which will be similar to that. Slight difference. I absolutely noticed. Slight difference in just the amount of ice that I got.
I would say, to me, like way different. I would say this one tastes more like it tastes more like it has higher fat.
Yeah, it's like almost on like a escalating scale, right?
Exactly.
It gets that much better.
Yep.
This one seems pretty icy.
This one is icy.
That one is icy.
I actually feel like this one is icier than this one.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
It may have been that the outside melted a little bit, and then when we refroze it, you get a little bit. You can definitely probably get it on this one. But just immediately, through all the testing of this, the scoop on this one, just trying to get your spoon through it is a completely different experience.
Yeah. So,
yep.
Like I said, I like the fattiest of the ice cream, so I'm always gonna like that one better.
All right, let's go. And then this is the condenser churn. I felt difference on the. I feel just a complete difference between these three. This one feels like an ice cream that you would get at home, like much better.
Yeah, I agree. I would say if you can.
When I said at home, I meant like at a store or something. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's really nice. And then I'm going to go here. Not too much difference in like the flavor of them. Obviously, they're all the same exact base, just done differently. And then the custard's going to have they're just the creamiest, all around better like mouthfeel and everything on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, people have different preferences, but Scott and I are on the creamier side of things. So.
Yeah, I prefer a richer ice cream, but I do like that how kind of bold the vanilla flavor is over here. So if you're trying to do a base where you're going to add something to it, it might be good to go here, whereas like a vanilla or a strawberry or something may not be as good with all that extra fat, so it'll cover it up a lot. You won't get that freshness of the strawberry.
Is that why most, like, if you're doing a fruit flavor, is usually a lighter texture?
Generally, yes.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's going to have less things that are going to cover up that fruit flavor.
Yeah, I like the pistachios and the nutty flavors, so I like that. Rich. So we're going to reset the table again, and when we're back, we're going to tell you, we're going to talk about how do you finish your ice cream. So, putting it in the freezer, temperatures, talk a little bit about inclusions. So stick around, and we'll be right back. In this segment, we are finishing up with how do you get the best texture coming out of your freezer. And Scott, before we get into the freezer itself, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about additives and kind of the role and play that they play in affecting, what's happening in the freezer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So depending on what additive you add, you're going to, one, get a creamier consistency. This can go from a few different things. Now, if you're going to be making a traditional ice cream or you're going to use perfect ice cream, that adds just a little bit of air to it. It's called overrun. Overrun is the addition of air either in a churn or sometimes industrially they pump it in. But that little bit of air is going to make little pockets so that when you scoop, it's a lot easier to scoop. That's one way to get a really easy to scoop, beautiful ice cream. 2, they cover up the ice crystals so that when you eat the ice cream, it just feels smoother, silkier, creamier, all the good things that you want with an ice cream. This is going to enhance that feeling. So really those are what's going to, benefit the ice cream when you add an additive.
Yeah, and the 2 ones that we kind of mentioned earlier on the episode, one is perfect ice cream, one is perfect sorbet. Can you talk about the differences between them?
Yeah, so they're made up, they're proprietary blends of different ingredients, and when you're adding a perfect ice cream, one of those ingredients needs to be heated. So you have to bring it up to that 180 degrees so that you get the full, benefits of the ingredient. Whereas all the ingredients in perfect sorbet, they just can be blended in and they're ready to use. That's what makes it great for sorbet. That way you don't have to cook the fruit. And 2, if you're making an American style ice cream, which we have 3 of them here, you can add them directly to that and you don't have to worry about, okay, now I have to cook this. It's one extra step for this style that's not necessary.
And we use stabilizers in all of our ice cream recipes. So if you want to give that a go, just and enter to win this week's giveaway. This week's giveaway will be a package of the perfect ice cream as well as a package of the vanilla beans. And you can enter to win by leaving in the comments below any additional questions that you may have about ice cream making. And I know that when we started planning this episode, we ended up cutting out a lot of content because we're like, it's going to be an hour long if we start getting to sweeteners and what that affects does. And we're like, let's just do the technique behind it. But I know there's a lot more nuances. So if you have any questions about that, leave it in the comments below and enter to win. All right. And I think, Scott, where we are now is, you've made the ice cream. It tastes great. It came out of your cooker, not your cooker, your ice cream, your churn. But it came out of your churn and it's delicious and you're popping it into your freezer. What's happening there?
All right, so a few different things happen here, and we can just add in a little part about like, what if I want chocolate chips or something in there?
Okay.
So as you're mixing your ice cream, it's going to get to the point where it's moving in one consistent mass. It's still fluid, but it's moving as one. It's starting to look like ice cream, almost like soft serve. If you've ever had soft serve, it'll look like that. That's the point where you want to add your mix-ins. Easy as that. You dump them in, and then it'll finish the freezing process there. That's the best thing. Also, if you have mix-ins, throw them in the freezer so when you add them in, they're not dropping the temperature and melting. That's something. Anything can be frozen, even chocolate chips. So that's something you can do there. Very shortly after that, it'll start to come together in, not chunkier form, but it'll just be more frozen. At that point, it needs to come out of the churn. You don't want to get it to the point where it is like a scoopable solid ice cream in the churn because it is just over churned at that point.
Okay.
And there is the ability to over churn it and have the butterfat separate. So while it's still slightly fluid, you'll be able to pick it up almost like a little bit firmer of a soft serve. Perfect time to take it out, put it into a container, and pop it in the freezer. Those are really important steps because some people think, I got to churn it till it looks like ice cream. No, that finishing of the freezing happens in the freezer.
Yeah. And why is it that you get this, perfectly creamy ice cream coming out of the churn and then you put it in the freezer and when you come back and you take it out to eat it, it's hard as a rock.
Hard as a rock.
Yeah.
So a number of different things. Not every recipe is formulated the same. So some recipes may be made with all milk. Oh, you have milk, you can make ice cream. If you have milk, yes, you can make ice cream, but it is a very heavy water content, which then makes for a lot of ice crystals, which then makes for something, and this is a very hot scooper I have right now, but something that's a lot more firm. This is frozen to a normal freezer temperature, which is 0 degrees. That's fine for freezing things, but sometimes with ice cream, it is just too hard. It makes that ice cream hard. It's unscoopable. You have to take, some people like sit there with a spoon and drive it in. You have to do a few things. Whether you can gauge your temperature on your freezer, if you can do that, set it to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. That's where, ice cream parlors and things like that. I just said parlor, so I'm 100 years old. But, ice cream stands, right, can absolutely, they have these machines that they set them to the specific temperature so it's smooth and creamy and scoopable and easy for their workers and also a better experience when you're eating it. If you can't do that, and this will happen with pretty much all these, is take it out of the freezer and in less than 10 minutes, that temperature has risen. Right?
Okay.
It's pulling in heat from the outside, and it is raising the temperature. Even if it doesn't look like it's melting at all, it is raising in temperature because it's trying to melt. So that's a good thing you can do, is just pull it out and let it temper. You've waited this long for ice cream, you can wait an extra few minutes. When you can finally get that scooper in, do so. Also, hot water, pretty much as hot as you can get it. I get mine pretty warm because I want that scoop to come out nice and smooth. I don't want it to be pulling or chunky. And you want to just have like a really beautiful scoop. If you just put it in regular water, that's totally fine. But warm water will work. A number of different things then come with the ingredients. Am I taking away the cream, or am I adding too much sugar? And that's one that we have here that we haven't tasted yet. Some people think, I like my ice cream sweet, right? And also, if I'm freezing it, that dulls my perception of sweetness. Also, I'm adding fat, that dulls the perception of sweetness. So why don't I add more sugar? That's going to run into a lot of issues, and you'll see when we scoop that one.
Okay.
Right, so let's just scoop these three. Let's see, this is the hardest of all, and I could tell, but I also have a nice, like, I am getting in there.
Putting your elbow into it.
Yeah, right, so, and just a rinse.
Or if you're my daughter, you just eat it with a spoon straight out of the carton.
And immediately, this is just that much easier to scoop.
Yes, I can.
You can see
huge
it.
Difference.
There's no holes in it. It's just that much easier to scoop. Then, when I get to one that has too much sugar, so remember this has less fat. This has less fat,
That's
and it's frozen
Mm-hmm.
to a lower temperature. This is around 15 degrees,
Okay.
and it's the control. And then we add too much sugar, and you can see one, it's melting much faster. But
yeah.
look how stretchy it is. This all
Not
has
in
the
like
same.
a good way.
Yes, not in a good way. But that's going to melt faster, one, because sugar doesn't freeze at the same temperature as water does. It freezes at a much lower temperature. So one, that's going to melt and drip all over the place, whereas you can already see these came out of the freezer at the exact same time. Which one looks the most appetizing?
Right.
The control, and for a reason.
Yeah. And I know one question that people might come across is, I'm in the grocery store, I grab my carton of my favorite brand, but it's really soft and I can always scoop it coming out of the freezer. Well, why can't I do that with any of these?
That comes back to the thing that we talked about earlier, which is overrun. Some of them, you can pick up a carton and go, this is a relatively large carton, but it only weighs a pint. It only weighs around 16 ounces. They pump around, 45% air into it. So what you're getting is a large carton that looks like a lot. It has the same amount as a smaller carton, but there's so much air in that, so when you scoop it, you can literally see it sometimes, just pockets and pockets and pockets of air. Not bad. It's a great thing if you can do it. It's just going to be a different eating experience than these.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I think that's kind of goes back to like the gums as well. I know we are using like a little bit of gums, but sometimes there's also a lot more gums in there, and that helps as well.
And yeah, when you have certain gums, they will capture that air and keep it, locked inside. So yes.
Okay. Well, hopefully today we provided you with a fairly comprehensive overview of how do you make different types of bases, how do you cook your base, how do you churn them, and really what you can do to maximize the deliciousness of your ice cream. If you have any questions, remember, leave them in the comments below to enter to win the giveaway. And until next week, from here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie Wang.
And I'm Scott Guerin.